Welcome back to How Do You Know When Your Project is in Trouble from the PDU podcast and Kahle Partners. Your presenter is Wes Kahle and I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is Module 3. In Modules 1 and 2, we looked at the first 3 of the 4 measures that should show you whether or not your project is in trouble. 7 simple questions, absence of key controls, as well as the degree of clarity in your status reporting. And now we are moving into what people are saying. So, Wes, what are people saying?
Yeah, very important to keep your ear to the ground. This is sort of a reality check upon all your other measures about whether your project is healthy or not. Remember, we said in the very beginning that it's important to meet with senior management to get their feedback on how things are going, irrespective of what your schedule, budget, and risk and issue tools are telling you. This is similar, but on a broader scale. You see, people are going to talk about your project or projects, and although what people say is the least reliable source of information, it is the most prevalent, and you've got to sift through it. Now, it's a dangerous issue to play with, but you need to invest the time and effort. And a couple of reasons why it's not and a couple of reasons why it's dangerous are as follows. First of all, what people say, their perceptions may not be based upon the facts. They may be based upon their opinions or their instincts. And that is a problem, but you need to hear those perceptions so that you can respond to them. And secondly, perceptions may be oriented on goals other than what is best for the project. For example, if you're going to automate someone's process, they may think that's a great efficiency enhancement objectively, but it also may mean that their staff or their budget levels may get cut, and so therefore they may have perceptions of the project that are meant to protect their budget or staff, irrespective of what's best for the project. So what people say is not that reliable of an indicator, but it is one that you cannot ignore.
Right, and because it isn't reliable, and isn't it also dangerous? Because we hear opinions, we hear thoughts, and most importantly, there's an enormous amount of company politics in what people are saying. Should we really listen to that?
Yeah, undoubtedly there's a danger, but it's sort of like fire, right? You know, fire is good for shedding light and heat. You just don't want to stand in the middle of it, okay? So, you know, another way of looking at it is to turn things around is, do you think a project manager can succeed on a strategic project without taking account of company politics, right? You know, you need to know what your senior management is thinking, what stakeholders are thinking, irrespective of what the objective measures of your project are showing you, because it's those opinions that shape the perceptions of whether the project is succeeding or not. So you don't want to get into the fire, but you definitely want to hear what's going on. You want to feel some of that warmth and some of that light. But the nice thing about listening to what people say is that you don't have to account for everything. You need to listen to everything, but there are 2 things you want to tune into. First of all, you want to turn into negative feedback, things that are people who are pointing out things that aren't good, okay? And you also want to pick up on any campaign level comments. And we'll talk more about what we mean by campaigning in just a moment. First of all, let's look at the negative stuff, what I call muttering, okay? Muttering is unfavorable or pessimistic comments that are conveyed to influence someone's thinking, but they're usually tendered to the audience without an explicit expectation of resolution. For example, I'm sure you've all heard these before. Folks might say, well, okay, I don't think it'll work, but okay. I mean, this individual is not asking you to change what you're doing discreetly. I mean, directly saying that you can't do this. They're just putting a placeholder out there that I don't think this will work. Okay, or they could say, I guess you could do it that way, which is another way of saying, I don't think that's the right way to do this. Or, I don't think my people are on board with this, but I agree with it. What is this person really telling you? What they're really telling you is that, hey, there's resistance in my organization, but I support you. But how much trust can you place in that support? These are the type of things that kind of the quasi-negative things that I call muttering. And your job is to sift through this muttering to determine what is significant and what is insignificant.
Right. Let me hold you right there. How do I do that? Because when people are muttering, you know, it's very difficult to suddenly realize, okay, was that significant? Was that insignificant? Was he just making a joke? Was it sarcasm? Or does he really mean what he was saying?
Yeah, there's a host of rules there, and experience clearly affects your ability to pick out things quickly. But here are some things to bear in mind. If you hear muttering from more than one person, okay, in other words, there's a common view or a pattern starting to form here, you're going to want to pay attention to that. If someone who's senior in the organization is saying this, okay, I'm going to want to pay attention to this. If it's repeated more than once, if the same person regularly repeats this muttered comment, you're going to want to get beneath the covers here, because maybe there's something substantive there that you need to understand. So whenever those tripwires are hit, when that negative comment is repeated or broadly understood or is coming from senior management, you're going to want to poke it to ask, is there something here? I mean, do you have anything to support that viewpoint? Is there something that I should be worried about here? I mean, obviously you have some concerns. Can you elaborate on that? You're going to want to get beneath the covers of that. But perhaps we should drill down a little bit more on this and provide some more examples of what this muttering is like. And the first one deals with stakeholder management. This could be your management team. It could be your customer's management team. But when you hear senior management saying things like, what's going on? Or, what's the status of the project? Something they should know. Or, who's in charge on this thing when it should be them, right? Or, I want to help you out here, Wes, but what do you need from me? What do you expect of me on this project? These are all indicators, okay, that there is something not quite right, okay? So when senior management says things like this or asks questions like this, that tells you that there's a gap between their head and yours, and you need to close that gap. The second type of muttering deals with what stakeholders might be saying. Okay, if you hear staff members of the project team, or more importantly, customer staff that are going to have to use the system or the process that your project is working on, saying things like, we're working really hard, but we can't get things done. Or they're using terms like they're frustrated or they're challenged, which are euphemisms for they're wasting all their time and energy on things that they don't think are worthwhile. Or they're saying that they can't get decisions out of senior management. These are indicators that there's a problem with the smooth flow of project work, the work streams taking place inside the effort. And you need to get beneath the covers of that to understand what are the drivers, what are the causes of these frustrations, so you can determine whether they're real or not, because they're not going to show up in your schedule and your budget until it's too late. Okay, and the last thing all PMs really want to listen for is when they hear folks saying that this project manager just no good or doesn't listen. And it's surprising how often this item comes up amongst senior managers. Now, when I consult with people at the vice president and executive vice president levels, they'll have buckets of where they place people, okay? And your senior management needs to be acting as a conduit to you as to when folks at his level or her level are developing the perception that you're not listening, or you may not have the skill set to do this job, so that you can understand what is the driver behind that perception and get it fixed. Because working harder or working faster is not going to change that perception. You need to understand why people feel that way and engage your boss to help get that perception fixed.
I get it. So because you are not sitting in these senior management meetings, you don't hear this muttering, these
That's
complaints.
right.
But you have to have somebody in there who acts as the fly on the wall for you. And if you come up and people are negative about you, they don't trust you, that you are being told that straight up, and you know where you stand.
Absolutely right. And this applies at many levels, not just the frontline project manager. I have actually had to counsel a senior vice president who was responsible for $1 billion project that he was in trouble. The project was doing great. It was ahead of schedule. It was under budget. He was doing a great job objectively, but the people at his level and above him viewed him not as a team player. Okay, and he wasn't hearing that. And I said, look, you got to embrace this. You're going to succeed on this project and fail as the executive sponsor of this project if you're not careful. So it applies to everyone. You got to listen to what people are saying, particularly senior folks, to make sure that you're not only succeeding objectively, but also succeeding in people's minds.
Right.
Okay. And we also want to key in here is that there may be one person who has a perception, but you want to look for the pattern, or whether there's a consensus. Even if it's not based upon the facts, in this case, perceptions can be reality, and you got to get in front of that issue. So that's what you want to listen for. So that addresses the muttering. Let's now talk about this thing called campaigning, because it's a very interesting animal here. Okay, campaigning is when someone declares a position or an outcome, a goal that they believe is preferable, okay, before establishing either the facts of the situation or seeking to understand your view on the matter. They basically say, it's mine, or this is better, this is good, we need to do this. They don't want to have a collaborative discussion around the issue. And typically, they will not openly declare their interests in why they are selecting that particular position. They'll just try to use fait accompli to declare their position and see if anyone objects. And then after they declare their position, they're going to solicit your reaction to their position. Typically, they'll ask for your approval, okay? And a couple of examples of how campaigning gets expressed. For example, someone might say that, oh, this technology is much better for our purposes than that technology. We need to use JavaScript for this web front end. We don't want to use HTML5 or any other technology. Or Flash, right, okay. You want to ask them the question, well, what makes you say that? Well, it may be because they have programmers who know HTML5 and no programmers know JavaScript. Well, that may be a problem, a real issue to be concerned with, but is it really germane to the success of the project? Is it really in the best interest of the project? Maybe we need to get some programmers with the other skill set. You don't know. So what you want to do is you want to hear for things where people declare what's best or what they think should be done without first having a discussion around what the facts are and what is best for the project.
So we're talking about a hidden agenda here and people sort of trying to nudge you towards their opinion of things.
Exactly right. Okay. And often it's not nefarious. It's not consciously done. It's just in the back of their minds and they respond emotionally to the situation, opportunistically. But that doesn't change the impact. It could have a negative impact upon the project. That's why you got to understand what is the driver behind the declaration of that position. Right. Okay. And let's contrast that with the way you want to make sure courses of action are selected, where there's an open discussion between the different points of view and folks agree on the facts of the situation and then reach a mutual understanding of how best to proceed based upon reconciling the strengths and weaknesses of the two positions. That's how you want to make decisions in a collaborative environment. But when folks are campaigning, when they're urgently trying to get you to buy in on their preference on the spur of the moment, that's generally an indicator of a problem down the road. Okay. Now, campaigning, though, is very helpful to hear because it can be indicative of an underlying concern that wasn't captured in the requirements, wasn't captured in the scoping document, wasn't captured in the business rules that you need to hear about. Remember we talked about how folks can surface objections to things that we need to listen to because we're looking at the project status from our vantage point. Well, a campaign has a similar benefit in that people may surface interest that they want to have pursued in the project that we need to be aware of in order to gracefully guide our project to conclusion. So you want to get beneath the covers of these campaign comments before you buy into them, okay? Because they may inform what you do going forward. So listen to it, but don't necessarily buy into it until you understand it.
And that takes us to the review already of knowing when your project is in trouble. So to begin, we've had the 4 measures. We've looked at the 7 simple questions, the absence of the key controls, degree of clarity in status reporting, and just now we heard what people are saying and how we have to listen to them, how we have to sift through everything that we hear. Wes, the review.
Yes. We started off at the very beginning saying that most folks don't have a crisp drill that they go through in order to determine whether a project is in trouble or not. They just kind of intuitively know. So knowing when a project is beginning to get in trouble, it can be difficult to do. Success is often quite clear, and so is failure. However, what happens when you see something like this? Are we in trouble or not? And we said that ambiguity about the health of your project is not your friend. So you need sensitive instruments. You need tools that will allow you to sift this tachycardia scan you see here to determine whether your project is in trouble or not, and whether you need to get busy trying to correct things. And we provided you these 4 measures: the 7 simple questions, a review to make sure that there are key controls in place, and there are 5 of them. We provided you some indicators to look at status reporting to see whether the status is providing you a good view into the health of the project, and we provided you some rules of the road to assess, to sift through what people are saying to determine whether it is consistent with what your more objective tools are telling you about the project. And with these 4 measures, okay, you'll be able to get a holistic view of the health of your project to tell yourself concretely, I'm doing okay, or I got a problem. Here's what that problem is. I need to get busy fixing it. And you need to use all 4 of them. And if any one measure fails, you have a problem. You got to get busy fixing it.
Right. So you're saying if one of the 7 simple question fails, if there is absence of key controls, just one of these that we have heard in the presentation in the webinar right now, I have a problem.
Close. Remember with the 7 simple questions, it's only if you get 2 or more questions that are no. Okay? But that leads to a failure of the 7 simple questions. So there's a tripwire for each one of the 4. If you hit that tripwire on any of the 4, then your project is in trouble. You don't have to have problems in each of the 4 measures. If any one measure fails, you got a problem.
All right, that's a tough order.
It is. But as we saw by covering this material here, if you develop a checklist for this, and there are templates that we make available on our website, you can actually scrub an inventory of projects in less than half an hour. It's really not that difficult.
In just a second, we are going to take a look at exactly where you can find all these templates and the video casts that Wes has been talking about. But before we do that, let's do a quick learning goals review, because we want to make sure that we have indeed achieved with this webinar what we set out to do. So, Wes, the first goal was describe, explain, and be able to apply the 4 measures for project success on your project. How have we achieved this learning goal?
Well, we walked through the 4 measures, the first one being the 7 simple questions, the second one, the absence of key controls and what controls you want to see in place. The third, we provided questions to ask around the status reporting to make sure that they was properly providing you a clear view into the health of the project. And lastly, the 4th measure was what people are saying. We provided you questions and examples of how to sift all the noise around your project to determine whether what is being said is consistent with what you're seeing in your reporting.
Right, and I think the second learning goal that we have is really a consequence of the first one, because if you understand what we talked about here, then you know what questions you now have to ask to determine, is my project in trouble or not, right?
Completely agree. In fact, I went through and counted up the questions that we reviewed in this presentation. There's over 20 of them. So we've now equipped our listeners with 20 different questions that they can poke around into the health of their projects and assess them to determine, is it really clear that this project is doing well, or is it equally clear that my project is in trouble and now I've got to do something about it?
So Wes, please tell us a few words about your company, and tell us where we can find all those goodies that you have been talking about throughout the webinar.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, Kahle Partners is a management and IT consulting company, and we've developed a library of online videocast-based professional development for managers and project managers. And you can find these materials out on our website at kahlepartners.com. In fact, we're running a promotion now that for the first 20 videocasts, you can stream the content of those videocasts for free merely by registering. Now, we provide the opportunity to download those videocasts as well as the show notes that are associated with them and a host of templates. There's a nominal fee associated with those, but the streaming version of those 20 videocasts is now for free. And if you have any questions that I haven't answered in the course of this discussion, please send me an email at wes.kahle@kahlepartners.com, and I'll get back to you immediately. Thank you.
We're nearing the end of our presentation, which means this is our final take action slide. Wes, what do you recommend that people go and do now?
Well, first of all, we want to append our knowledge that we have been gathering from our first 3 measures with the information we've gathered from our 4th measure of listening to what people are saying. So we want to inventory what the major stakeholders have been saying about your project and see if that triggers any tripwires on your project listing. Then you want to review that information to see how it reconciles with the objective facts around your project. If the two are in consonance, then there's not an issue. You can continue to move forward. However, if there is a problem, you want to note that, and then reviewing all of your other measures and all of the tripwires or failure points that you've identified on your projects, you're going to want to develop a corrective action plan to right your projects. And then you're going to want to talk to your manager about your plan to make sure that he or she is on board with your plan, because you're going to need your support to write these projects.
Very well, wonderful. Wes, thank you very much for having been here today. Thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed myself.
Oh, thank you. I did as well. I really appreciate the opportunity, Cornelius. Thank you very much.